Have you ever looked in the mirror and had that unsettling feeling that you don't really know the person staring back at you? Not physically, but something deeper feels like it belongs to someone else. The career path you're on, the relationships you maintain, the goals you chase. How many of these choices are truly yours, and how many were handed to you by your parents, society, or your own fears? Let me ask you something more direct. When was the last time you made a decision without considering what others would think? When was the last time you expressed a thought or feeling without filtering it first? This disconnect between who we present to the world and who we truly are isn't just uncomfortable. It's the root of an epidemic of emptiness. We've become masters at crafting perfect personas, while the voice of our authentic self grows fainter with each passing day. And the cost? Anxiety that medication doesn't fix. Depression that persists despite outward success. A constant nagging feeling that something essential is missing from your life, as if you're living someone else's story while your own remains unwritten. Carl Jung, one of psychology's most profound thinkers, discovered that finding your true self isn't some luxury for the privileged few. It's the essential psychological task that determines whether you merely exist or truly live. And when you ignore this inner work, you pay with your vitality, your relationships, and ultimately, your sense of meaning. Today, we're diving into Jung's roadmap for authentic selfhood. Are you ready to discover who you were born to become? Then let's begin. Since childhood, what have you been taught about being acceptable? Maybe you learned to be polite, to hide your anger, to prioritize others' needs above your own. Perhaps you were praised for being strong, for never showing weakness, for always appearing confident. These lessons created what Jung called the persona, the mask you wear to meet the world's expectations. And make no mistake, we all wear these masks. Think about how differently you behave at work, at home, with close friends, or on social media. Each context pulls forward a different version of you. While the persona serves an important social function, the danger comes when you forget it's just a role you're playing. When was the last time you caught yourself smiling and nodding when inside you wanted to scream? How often do you swallow your true thoughts out of fear of judgment? This isn't just occasional inauthenticity, it's a profound identity crisis. You excel at work, maintain the perfect social media presence, check all the boxes of success, and yet something feels hollow at your core. Modern life has only intensified this problem. We now juggle more personas than ever before. Professional, parent, partner, friend, and multiple digital identities across platforms, each with its own unspoken rules. It's exhausting, and it's no wonder so many of us feel fragmented and disconnected. But here's what Jung would tell you, that feeling of emptiness isn't your enemy. It's your first ally on the path to authenticity. That discomfort is your psyche's way of telling you something essential is missing. It's an invitation to look deeper. So if the persona is just the mask you wear, what lies beneath it? Jung proposed that our consciousness, everything we're aware of, is merely the tip of the iceberg. The vast majority of our psyche exists below the waterline in what he called the unconscious. But what exactly is hidden in these depths? First, and most important, is what Jung called the shadow, all the parts of yourself you've rejected, denied, or disowned. Think about it. Which emotions were you taught were unacceptable? Anger, jealousy, neediness? Which aspects of your personality did you learn to hide? Your sensitivity, your ambition, your desire for attention? Throughout childhood, as you learned what brought acceptance and what brought rejection, you naturally pushed certain parts of yourself into the shadows. But here's the critical insight Jung offered. What you repress doesn't disappear. It operates from the unconscious, emerging in unexpected ways. Have you ever had an emotional reaction that seemed completely out of proportion? Felt inexplicably triggered by someone you barely know? Found yourself repeatedly drawn to people who treat you poorly? Jung would explain that you're encountering your shadow, those disowned parts of yourself demanding recognition. Let me make this concrete with an example. Imagine a woman raised to be unfailingly accommodating and nice. She represses her anger and assertiveness because they conflict with her good girl identity. Over time, she finds herself irrationally irritated by assertive women at work and drawn to domineering partners who express the very qualities she's denied in herself. Her shadow is speaking through these reactions, showing her what she's refusing to see in herself. But the shadow isn't just negative, it also contains your unrealized potential. Perhaps your creativity was discouraged in favor of practicality. Maybe your leadership abilities were overshadowed by a dominant parent. These golden aspects of the shadow represent untapped gifts waiting to be reclaimed. Confronting your shadow isn't comfortable. It's often what Jung called meeting your demons, but it's where the journey to authenticity begins. Because only by acknowledging and integrating these disowned parts can you become whole. Ask yourself, what parts of yourself have you been denying? What emotions do you refuse to feel? What qualities in others consistently trigger strong reactions in you? Your answers will point directly to your shadow. Beyond your personal unconscious lies an even deeper layer, the collective unconscious. This is perhaps Jung's most profound contribution, the idea that beneath our individual experiences exists a shared psychological inheritance, a universal foundation common to all humanity. Within this collective unconscious reside archetypes, universal patterns that appear in myths, fairy tales and dreams across all cultures and time periods. Think of archetypes as the fundamental characters in the human story. The hero, the mother, the wise elder, the trickster. How do these archetypes show up in your life? Have you noticed yourself repeatedly playing certain roles? The caretaker, always putting others first. The perfectionist who can never rest. The rebel who reflexively resists authority. These aren't random patterns, but archetypal energies operating through you. One particularly important archetype for our discussion is the self. The self represents the totality of your psyche, conscious and unconscious, and the organizing principle toward which psychological development naturally moves. Jung described it as the archetype of wholeness and the regulating center of the personality. The self often appears in dreams as a significant figure, a wise elder, a divine child, or as a mandala, a circular symbol representing completeness. These manifestations point toward your fuller potential, what you might become if all parts of your psyche were acknowledged and integrated. Have you ever been deeply moved by a character's journey in a film or book? Found yourself inexplicably drawn to certain symbols or myths? These responses often signal connections to archetypal patterns within you. They speak to something deeper than your personal history. They speak to your shared humanity. Now we arrive at the heart of Jung's teaching. The process of individuation, the lifelong journey of integrating the conscious and unconscious aspects of your personality to become who you truly are. Individuation isn't about perfection or transcending your humanity. It's about becoming whole by embracing all aspects of yourself, both light and dark. Jung described it as becoming one's own self or coming to selfhood. This process typically begins in midlife, often triggered by a crisis or that persistent feeling that something essential is missing despite outward success. Have you ever achieved a long-pursued goal only to find it didn't bring the fulfillment you expected? This is often the first sign that the values guiding the first half of life no longer satisfy. The individuation journey isn't linear, but cyclical, involving several key phases. First comes the confrontation with the shadow, acknowledging those disowned aspects of yourself. This requires tremendous honesty. Can you admit to having qualities you've spent years denying or projecting onto others? Next is engaging with the anima or animus, the unconscious feminine aspect in men or masculine aspect in women. These archetypes shape how you relate to the opposite sex and to your own inner opposite gender qualities. Have you ever noticed patterns in your romantic attractions or relationships that seem to repeat despite your conscious intentions? These patterns often reveal the influence of these archetypes. Then comes the encounter with the self-archetype, which often emerges through dreams, meaningful coincidences, or profound life experiences. This represents the gradual shift from ego-centeredness to a wider identity centered on your authentic nature. Throughout this journey, active engagement with your unconscious is essential. And this brings us to the practical question: how do you actually begin this process of finding your true self? If you're finding value in this exploration of Jung's path to authentic selfhood, consider subscribing and turning on the notifications to join our community. Now that we understand Jung's map, let's explore some practical tools for beginning your own journey of self-discovery. Dream work stands at the center of Jung's approach. Unlike Freud, who saw dreams primarily as wish fulfillment, Jung viewed them as communications from the unconscious, often compensating for conscious attitudes or highlighting neglected aspects of our personality. Have you ever had a dream that stayed with you for days, that seemed to carry a message you couldn't quite decipher? These dreams are often your unconscious speaking directly to you. To work with your dreams, keep a journal by your bed and write them down immediately upon waking, before they fade. Look for recurring themes, strong emotions, or striking images. Rather than interpreting dreams literally, approach them symbolically, asking what each element might represent in your inner life. Active imagination is another powerful technique Jung developed. This involves entering a meditative state and allowing images to arise spontaneously, then engaging with them through internal dialogue. Imagine meeting a figure from a dream and asking them questions, or visualizing a safe inner space where you can encounter aspects of yourself. Shadow work begins with noticing your strong emotional reactions, especially negative ones. What triggers disproportionate anger, jealousy, or contempt in you? Ask yourself, what qualities in this person trigger me, and how might these reflect parts of myself I've denied? For instance, if you're consistently irritated by people who openly seek attention, could you be repressing your own need for recognition? If you harshly judge those who show vulnerability, might you be denying your own natural human fragility? Similarly, notice whom you idealize or admire excessively. These positive projections can reveal golden shadow aspects, qualities you possess but haven't acknowledged. Identifying your personas is another valuable practice. Throughout a typical week, notice how you shift your presentation in different contexts. Which roles deplete you and which energize you? This awareness creates space between your authentic self and the masks you wear. It's important to address a common misunderstanding about Jung's approach. Finding your true self doesn't mean abandoning all social responsibilities in favor of unbridled self-expression. Jung emphasized that individuation occurs within, not against, the collective context of your life. In fact, Jung saw individuation as holding creative tensions rather than escaping them. You don't transcend your shadow, you integrate it. You don't abandon social responsibilities, you fulfill them more authentically. Jung used the alchemical symbol of the union of opposites to describe this process. Rather than choosing between opposing values or impulses, individuation involves holding their tension and finding a third position that honors both. How does this apply to your everyday dilemmas? You might feel torn between career ambitions and family commitments, between self-care and caring for others, or between creative expression and practical necessities. Individuation doesn't eliminate these tensions, but transforms your relationship to them, allowing for more conscious, nuanced responses. This is why Jung's path differs fundamentally from simplistic self-help approaches. It's not about positive thinking or affirmations, but about genuine integration, acknowledging the full spectrum of your humanity, including the parts that are difficult, contradictory, or culturally devalued. How do you know if you're making progress on this path? Jung identified several markers of successful individuation. Greater psychological flexibility is a key sign, the ability to adapt to changing circumstances without losing your center. Do you find yourself less rigidly identified with particular roles or beliefs, more able to see multiple perspectives without feeling threatened? Decreased projection is another important indicator. Are you less triggered by others' behavior? More able to see people clearly without the distortions of your own unconscious material? A sense of meaning and purpose often emerges as you align with your authentic path. This isn't necessarily dramatic. It might simply be a quiet confidence that your life is expressing something essential about who you are. Meaningful coincidences tend to increase as you individuate. Jung saw these as manifestations of the ordering principle of the self, suggesting alignment between inner and outer reality. Perhaps most importantly, you'll experience a growing acceptance of life's inherent contradictions. Rather than seeking perfect resolution or escape from life's complexity, can you embrace paradox and uncertainty as natural aspects of existence? Before we conclude, it's worth considering the broader implications of Jung's work. He believed that individual transformation was inseparable from collective evolution, that each person who undertakes the journey toward wholeness contributes to the psychological development of humanity as a whole. Writing during the turbulent period between two world wars, Jung recognized that humanity's greatest threat came from our failure to acknowledge our shadow aspects. He saw how unintegrated shadow material, denied aggression, superiority, and fear could erupt in collective forms like war, persecution, and environmental destruction. His message remains urgently relevant today. Our outer conflicts reflect our inner divisions. Only by taking responsibility for our whole selves, including the parts we'd rather not see, can we create a more conscious world. The wisdom Jung uncovered reveals a fundamental truth. Authentic selfhood isn't an abstract concept. It's your birthright and deepest calling. Every time you acknowledge a disowned part of yourself, every time you question a limiting belief, every time you honor your unique nature despite external pressure to conform, you take a step toward wholeness. Ask yourself, how much of your life is spent fulfilling expectations that aren't truly yours? What would change if you had the courage to live more authentically? What parts of yourself have been waiting for permission to emerge? The journey won't always be comfortable. There will be periods of confusion and resistance when old certainties dissolve before new understanding emerges. But these challenging passages are necessary crucibles for transformation. In a world that profits from your self-doubt and offers endless distractions from inner work, choosing the path of authenticity is a radical act. It requires courage to face your shadows, wisdom to recognize your projections, and patience to allow your true nature to emerge. As Jung himself wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." This isn't just beautiful philosophy. It's the most practical psychological guidance for creating a life of meaning, purpose, and genuine connection. The question isn't whether you'll answer the call to authentic selfhood, but how, and the answer will unfold uniquely through your own lived experience as you brave the journey of becoming entirely yourself. What part of yourself has been waiting the longest to be acknowledged? What first step might you take today toward greater authenticity? The path to your true self begins with these questions and the courage to answer them honestly.